Hello, everybody. Today I have a guest on Thinking to Infinity. This is STAV. I would like you to meet her. She is the host of She Equips Herself. She's a professional firearms instructor, primarily focusing on training women to defend themselves. And after watching her videos, I knew she would be the absolute perfect person for a follow-up interview after my recent video on whether gun rights are God-given. So please tell us, who is STAV?
Oh boy, how do I answer that question? So my name is Stav, that's short for Stavroula. It's a long Greek name that I was blessed with by my mother. And I became a firearms instructor after never growing up with guns. I grew up in a very first-generation traditional Greek household, so my parents didn't have any guns. Not that we were ever anti-gun, it just was never presented as an option growing up. And so as I got older, my sister, who's 10 years older than me, actually took me to the range one day. And I believe it was like a women's only class. So she took me and I was 18 years old and I fell in love with it. So I would go with her whenever she could take me because I just loved hanging out with my sister. I have two sisters, but she was the first one to get into guns. And so we'd go shooting all the time and then she moved away. So I decided when I turned 21, I wanted to get my own gun license. And I did. And one of the things that I found after I got my gun license was that when other women found out, first of all, they were shocked because I live in Massachusetts and people don't really talk about guns all that much here. But when other women found out, they wanted to learn as well. So I realized that I really liked teaching other women how to safely handle guns and how to not be scared of them or intimidated by them. So that's how I got instructing, and then I decided to take it to the internet so I could reach even more people.
Very cool. Kind of ironic that Massachusetts, of all places, at one point,
tell me about it.
very crucial
Yes.
gun ownership to our country even existing, and now where it is now.
It's very
So,
ironic.
so you mentioned you didn't grow up around firearms. You went from somebody who never carried firearms to somebody who's training other people to carry firearms. And another interesting thing that I found out after I found your firearms training channel is that you are a Christian. Is that correct?
Very much so. I love Jesus.
Cool. You got that answer right. It does say right here. That is true. So you're doing great on these so far.
Thank
So
you.
how did you come to faith?
Well, I actually grew up in a Greek Protestant church, which is fairly uncommon in the Greek culture because Greeks are usually Greek Orthodox. But
Right. You're either Greek Orthodox or you're not.
Right. Or
Right.
you're wrong.
Right.
So I actually recently found out that missionaries from Massachusetts went to, I think it was Turkey where my family was at the time. And that's where this all started. But it was missionaries from Massachusetts, where I am now, going over. And that's how my family became Protestant in Greece and Turkey and then Greece. And then
Wow.
my parents moved here. And so I've been attending Protestant churches since I was a baby, grew up in the church, loved it. I was at church multiple times a week for youth group and Sunday school and Greek school, 2 church services on Sundays. And so I grew up in the church, fell away in my teenage and early adult years. And a couple years ago, the Lord just did a crazy work in me. And now I just can't stop talking about him. So
That's awesome. So it seems like both firearms training and coming to a genuine faith in your Christianity, both of those happened in more recent years. Did you have a point as those were both developing where you kind of stopped and had to question whether these things were compatible with each other? Was it like these both grew together so you didn't notice, or was it like a chicken and the egg thing, except chicken was the cross and an egg was a gun?
yeah.
How did that work?
So I never really had that debate with myself. I was always very sure of why I was pro-gun and in the fact that Jesus Christ is real and changed my heart. So I've never had to debate those two things within myself, though other people have brought it up to me. The reason why I carry is because I believe that God has given me a right to live and to defend myself and other people. So it was never a debate for me personally.
That makes sense. But I'm sure you've encountered people who do see it as a debate.
yes.
So how do you respond to critics who believe that owning a firearm contradicts Christian teachings on peace and nonviolence? And for this one, I figured we could do a role play where let's imagine I'm someone who just watched a video where you said that you can be a Christian and still protect yourself by carrying a gun. And I watched that video and my response to you is, nuh-uh.
That's it? That's your only response? Nuh-uh.
I guess more succinctly, how do you respond to the critics who in their own minds, they see that there's a disconnect between those two things?
Well, if I could share a story with you about an incident where this happened to me.
Please do. It's story time.
One of my close friends that I grew up in the church with, he was pro-gun for a bit, but then decided that it went against his faith, which is the same faith as me, but he just saw it differently. So he would say that I should have faith in God to protect me, and I shouldn't have to carry a weapon with me. And what I basically told him is that by that same logic, we shouldn't wear seatbelts or have fire extinguishers in our home, and just trust that I'm not going to get into a car accident ever, or I won't have some sort of grease fire in my kitchen. But God gives us a brain to be able to think through things and abilities to be able to hone those skills and be able to defend ourselves. I don't think that we need to be totally 100% just God will protect me from everything. I think we also need to be very realistic about the abilities and mind that he gave us.
Yeah. Well, I think in addition to carrying a firearm, you should also carry a microphone so that you can drop that in situations like that.
I've seen you do that on camera. I like that. I like that move.
That was a solid response to that one, I think. Did you have further conversations with him? Did it seem like that was taking root, or did it seem like he had kind of already made up his mind?
He was pretty set in his opinion, which I think can happen a lot, especially with things that are so polarizing, like firearms. Which is unfortunate. We should be able to have these back and forth discussions with open minds. And I try to do that as well, even though I don't think I'm ever going to change my mind on it, because I see it from a different perspective, I think, especially as a woman.
Yeah. Can you share a story where either for you or for somebody that you were training where that training actually was able to tangibly help them in a real life situation?
Like a self-defense situation?
I mean, obviously there are the more intangible aspects of it, of just the confidence that somebody has of knowing that in the event something might happen, I could defend myself and others in this situation. Mm-hmm. But I know some people have had stories where they would say, absolutely, my gun saved my life in this particular instance, or just the training that I had, even if I didn't have to draw my weapon, my training was something that I credit with saving my life in a certain situation or protecting others.
Okay, yes, I can think. I have a situation. It doesn't involve anybody having to shoot a gun. But this is something that I think is equally, if not more so important. That's situational awareness, which is something I teach about being aware of your surroundings and what's going on, which can hopefully stop you from ever having to use any sort of self-defense tools. So I have a friend who she's also very anti-gun, but when I love someone, I'm gonna tell them, like, you need to pay attention, you need to keep yourself safe. So I tell this to people all the time, whether they're in classes or friends and family. And she was telling me a story one day about how she was outside of her job. She was working at a law firm at the time. And she went out to the parking lot. She was the last person to leave. And she noticed there was a man who she assumed based on his appearance was homeless. And he was standing in the parking lot and just kind of not doing much, which is an indication that something's probably going on. And so she walks to her car, she shuts the door, and she said, I don't normally lock my door immediately, but for some reason that day I heard you in my head say, lock your door. So she locks her door, and the guy immediately is at her window, knocking on her window. And thankfully, she knew enough to not open the window or get out, but she ended up driving away. And we don't know what that man wanted from her. And I'm just glad she didn't have to find out, because it could have been nothing. Yeah. But because I was hounding her, like, pay attention to your surroundings all the time, that might have saved her from some sort of trouble.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, that's really the best case scenario with the preparation and the training, is that you never get into a situation that's going to be a life or death matter because you weren't paying attention to what was going on around you.
Exactly.
That's excellent. In what way has your faith impacted your training? So do you ever incorporate prayer into your training sessions or in your carry routine when you're getting ready for the day? Prayers of protection or something along those lines?
I've never connected it to like the activity of putting my gun on during the day, or if I'm about to leave the house, oftentimes I'll say a prayer for protection, or in the morning, usually when I pray for protection over my whole family, and understand that God is in control of that. I don't pray before I train, though. But you know what? You just gave me a great idea, because I think that that's really important. I mean, we need to pray without ceasing, right? And that includes at the range.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts on churches and faith communities taking steps to support responsible gun ownership and self-defense training for Christians? I know that a lot of churches are very open to their members even carrying, and we've seen instances, unfortunately, where some churches have been attacked.
When it comes to churches, I think that I'm going to try to say this gently, I think that if a church is against having some sort of security team, then they're living in a sort of fake reality. Because the reality is, unfortunately, we see this happening maybe even more and more now, is what it seems like, that people are going into houses of worship because they might assume that people there won't be carrying and they won't meet any sort of resistance. And so it's like a soft target. You're going to go in there expecting not to have anybody try to stop you. So I think it's really important for churches to have a security team set up, or even just knowing that certain people in your congregation are placed in places who are carrying guns and will be able to respond to some sort of threat. Otherwise, you're kind of just sitting ducks, and I don't think that that's a very smart and wise idea. So I think it's really important.
I think in general, being a sitting duck is not equated with wisdom.
Right. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. So there's a colloquialism for people who are supportive of the Second Amendment as far as hunting rights, but not really as concerns tyranny or self-defense. And I believe those people are referred to as FUDs. And do you see a correlation between people who are that way within the 2A community and people who are nominal Christians within Christianity who might say, well, yeah, I'm a Christian. If I got to check a box on a form, then I'm going to go with Christian. But yet they don't really hold to all the truths of Christianity.
Oh, boy.
The questions do get harder as we go.
Well, I think when it comes to that, people need to look back at history, because the Second Amendment was put in place because of tyranny. It is to prevent our government from becoming a tyrannical government and taking all the control away from the people. That's why this whole country was started. And I think that people can look at gun rights as something that is not actually a right. It's just, and I think you mentioned this in your video, it's not a God-given right, it's a privilege. And I think that knowing the difference is extremely important, because God has given us the right to freedom and to self-defense. And without the Second Amendment, we can't preserve that. And I think that people overlook that, even though they know American history and how important it was in forming this country to begin with.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting how some people will take an ideology and lightly adopt it. But
Yes.
It seems like you, both with gun rights, gun training, and with your faith, you wanted to step those out in a full way. You know, you wanted to completely embrace firearms and Jesus.
Yeah, and I definitely see that as well with Christianity, because you can take it and really water it down and turn it into something that you like, and you turn Jesus into a Jesus that you like, or God into a God that you like. But that is not reality. You need to take the whole truth for what it is. And otherwise, you're just creating a fake version of something. And I guess I believe in viewing the entirety of a situation, understanding it that way.
Are you familiar with the book and film and documentary Through Gates of Splendor?
That sounds familiar, but I don't think I've read or seen it.
Yeah, it's highly recommended, by the way. It's the true story of 5 American missionaries in the 1950s, I believe, who were murdered while sharing the gospel with a tribe in Ecuador. And that tribe was known to be extremely violent, and these missionaries went anyway. They were armed when they went to spread the gospel to this group, but they'd said that they only wanted to use their rifles as a last resort because they considered themselves ready for eternity due to their faith in Christ, that they would go to heaven if they died. But these natives were not. And so they didn't want to use their rifles unless they absolutely have to. And their lives, unfortunately, were taken. Incredibly, that tribe was later reached by the missionaries' widows. They went. And so the tribe was evangelized to, and they did ultimately become Christians. This is, as I said, the questions get harder as we go. What are your thoughts on the eternal impact of having to use your firearm in self-defense when you're secure in Christ, whereas the potential eternal situation of an attacker is unknown?
Oh my goodness, that is a really good question. And now that you mentioned that story, I remember someone telling me about this, and I heard about it, but I haven't read the book yet. I probably should. And as you were explaining that, I was thinking about the name of your channel and how it's so relevant because, yes, as Christians, we have to have this eternal perspective on life. That's our worldview. We don't just see what's happening here and now. We see it from an eternal perspective. And so as you were explaining that story, I thought, yeah, if they use their firearms against those people, there's no chance that they'll ever know Christ. They're just gone. So in that situation, I think that what they did was correct, and they trusted that God would then use that situation, and they're not using their weapons on them for good. I think that the thing that we need to understand here is that using a gun, for example, I don't carry a gun in order to kill somebody if they're going to try to rape me or kill me. I'm not carrying a gun to kill them. I carry a gun to stop them. And so if someone attacks me or they're trying to rape me, a gun is a way for me as someone who's 5'2" and 110 pounds to potentially be able to stop someone who's much larger than me, where I couldn't do that with my bare hands. If someone did that to me and I didn't have a gun on me, I would obviously fight back with my hands, but a gun is a way for me to fight back, and I'm not aiming to kill that person. I am aiming to stop whatever they're doing to me that might cause death or serious bodily harm. And I think that knowing that is really important. That's something I learned through gun classes, because I think we have this idea that I'm going to shoot someone, even in self-defense, to kill them. And that's not the case. Once the threat stops, and that's up to that person that is doing the assault or whatever they're doing, once the threat is over, I stop my response. So I think that's an important thing to realize, because I don't think a lot of people understand that concept, that it's not to kill, it's to stop the threat, which that person is, they're the ones who are deciding when it starts and stops.
Yeah. And message to bad guys, if you're trying to harm an innocent person and it results with you getting a hole put in you, you should stop what you're doing. You should stop right there. That's a good sign to quit. I discussed this with, my wife and I were discussing this with some dear friends of ours as I was preparing for this interview. And hi, Blake and Veronica. Love you guys. And I don't remember exactly which one of them had mentioned, but they were pointing out the importance of motive. And that group of men, their whole mission was, we are going to spread the gospel to this group. And if they attack us, then we kind of have this as our plan B. But the main goal was, we want to see these people saved. And that's why their wives picked up the mantle and went even after they had lost their lives. Whereas in a normal day, like your goal is to get in the grocery store and make it home to your family. And if someone else's goal is just to attack you, then it really does change the situation.
Yes,
I think.
Even if we look at the apostles and how they all were martyred, they went into these situations knowing that their job was to spread the gospel, and they were going to do that to their death, and they understood that. That was their aim, and we don't know, I mean, we know because now we have this massive church, but obviously their impact from that was far-reaching, and they didn't try to stop those things from happening to them because they understood what their motive was. Yeah.
I think there's also something to be said for, if that attacker does survive, we don't know whether they ever would or wouldn't come to Christ. Whereas if you survive, we know you're still going to be an important person in your family. You're still going to be spreading the gospel on YouTube and to people directly. So there's a lot of factors involved in that, for sure. So I found out after I reached out to you about this interview concerning firearms and faith that you also have a channel and podcast focusing on studying the Bible, which is Holy Hype.
Yes.
And it is awesome. I've watched most of the videos on that channel. Just
you.
a few to go. Yeah. And it is very solid biblical teaching and thinking. There's Bible studies through the book of Mark. There's taking a particular issue and thinking your way through it very logically, very rationally, and always looking to Scripture to ground all of the answers that you're giving. I can definitely recommend anybody watching this. You should dedefinitely check it out. It's a great channel. So tell us about that endeavor, starting with why the name Holy Hype.
Well, I noticed that I was starting to incorporate faith more and more into my She Equips Herself firearms channel. And while most of the responses were very positive, of course, there's always a couple negative responses. But I decided that
I'm surprised. Yeah, the first video that you posted talking about your faith on She Equips Herself, and then you did one just talking about, here's what I do when I'm studying the Bible. I was going through the comments, wincing, like waiting. Is she just going to get ripped apart? Oh my goodness. Everybody's just rooting her on, and man, you knew your audience, so that was really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting because the gun community, a lot of them are Christians or into the Christian faith at some level. So there's a lot of overlap there, but I just realized I was incorporating that more and more into that channel. I had so much I wanted to talk about as I dive deeper into my faith. I got baptized a couple years ago, and that's when this all I was on fire. That's what happened to me. So I wanted to create a new space where I can dive full on into Christianity and the Bible. And the more I read the Bible, the more I realize how amazing it is. And I think that a lot of people have this misconception that the Bible is outdated or boring or irrelevant. And I don't think that you could be further from the truth, because it's amazing. Once you read it all and you see this picture that God has painted by inspiring the different authors of the Bible to create this one story, it's just incredible. So I just wanted to share it, and you can even probably hear I'm getting all excited talking about it. So the name Holy Hype just came from me wanting to hype up the Bible and the way of Jesus and get other people excited about it as well. And that's kind of what I'm doing on that platform, especially with my Bible study. I want to teach people how to go through a text, because it's really important to understand context. And I also want to show how things connect between like the Old Testament and the New Testament, because I think that makes it even more exciting.
Absolutely. As I mentioned, you seem to have a really solid biblical knowledge and understanding of the topics that you're covering on Holy Hype. Did you have any formal training in that, or is this just what you picked up growing up in church? Is it, do we have Mike Winger to thank for all of this, or
I love Mike Winger. Shout out to Mike Winger.
You gotta. Winger.
No formal training. And it's been interesting to see how the things that I learned from childhood just stuck with me. Like the Bible verses we learned through those little Sunday school songs. All of these things I learned over the years that maybe I didn't think were that important. You
are in the Lord's army. Yeah.
They stayed with me, and it's just interesting how it comes back, and it gave me this really solid foundation just growing up in the church that I'm now being able to use to spread the gospel on YouTube. I'm also in some Bible studies that I think are really beneficial. If you don't know where to start in the Bible, find a good Bible-believing church and join a Bible study, which I know can be a little scary, but once you get in there, you're going to meet people and you're going to learn about the Bible, and it's just really helpful, especially if you're just getting started or you just want to learn more about the Bible.
Cool. And make sure you watch some Holy Hype episodes.
Yeah, I can do that as well.
So, do you speak Greek?
I do. I'm fluent. I went to Greek school every Saturday as a kid, which was not fun at the time, but I'm thankful.
Is that something that has been able to help your Bible study?
Oh, yeah. It helps a lot. Like, oftentimes I'll encounter a word and I'll want to know what it says in the original Greek. So I'll look at the Greek and I actually know what that word means, which is very helpful. Even though there's so many resources now where you can look up the Greek on your own and find out what the word is, it's just really helpful in helping me understand things on a deeper level.
Awesome. Well, if I have any questions as I'm preparing a future Thinking to Infinity episode, I might be giving you a call.
Yeah, all your Greek questions, just come to me.
Yeah. Great. Well, I didn't tell you I was going to do this part, but this next section is kind of like rapid fire questions. Just stream of consciousness stuff. I'm going to throw something out and you just give me the first answer that comes to your mind. But we are going to be resetting the easy level. So we're going to go back and start easy, and then we'll see where we go from there. So what are the 5 rules of safely handling a gun?
Okay, keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot.
Okay,
Treat every
got that
gun
one.
as if it's loaded. Keep it pointed in a safe direction. Know your target and what's beyond. Is that 5? Oh, I missed one.
That's 4. That's 4.
I'm missing one.
The 5th one was don't let Alec Baldwin hold it. So
I
don't
got
let
them
Alec
all.
Baldwin hold it.
Okay.
The judges have said we're going to give you a pass on that one.
All right.
Still 100%.
Fair.
So, all right, we're good. What is the best way for me to defend my honor when my wife totally schools me at the gun range because she's a better shot than I am?
Just compliment her and be proud of her, because that's your wife.
That's true. That's true.
You know, you are one. So when she wins, you win.
Yeah, and that's a true story, actually. I grew up shooting guns occasionally, not often, but, you know, everybody that I knew in my family owned, and we were taught how to safely handle them. And I had gone to the range with friends, and so when I took my wife for the first time, she absolutely annihilated me right off the bat. And
awesome.
yeah, that was a good moment of God teaching me humility, of having to go over to her and be like, what are you doing? Show me what I'm doing wrong.
Experience, because my husband has been handling guns since he could walk, and he's just the best shooter I know. And I'm not just saying that because I'm his wife. He's literally the best shooter and firearms instructor I know. But
I've seen some videos.
I do
He's
well,
good.
yeah, he's great. Every time I do well, he's always very proud of me, and that makes me feel good. So that's a lesson for you men out there. Let the ego go.
Right. Very cool. What's your go-to caliber and gun choice for concealed carrying?
I love my Shield Plus, and I know that there's another Shield fan in this conversation, but it's my 9mm Shield
True
Plus.
story.
I also like my Glock 42, but the Shield Plus holds a special place in my heart, and that's just my all-time favorite.
Cool. Have you figured out the logic that Glock uses for why they number their weapons the way they do?
Yes. I mean, I understand it, but I don't love it. It's just they make them like model 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It makes sense.
Right.
But then they don't release some, so there's a big gap. I tell this to my husband, that the way that they name guns with the letters and the numbers, it's a very masculine thing. Like if you look, and I know this is very girly to say, but if you look at like a shoe website, they name shoes or purses, they give them names like the Lauren or the Jessica. That makes sense to me. But the numbers and the letters, I can't. It's too much.
Yeah, I'm going to have to skip all of the jokes that I have on the naming for women's cosmetics.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yeah, that seems like somebody got kicked out of the porn industry and they were like, well, maybe you can name mascara now. And,
I know, they go a little too far there.
On that last question about gun caliber and gun choice,
yes.
I'm told we would have accepted anything besides Barrett 50 cal or Yeet cannon. So,
oh my goodness. Okay.
So you're still batting 1,000. Yeah.
Okay.
Favorite Bible translation?
Favorite Bible translation. I really like the CSB, which is something that I've discovered fairly recently after watching a Bible review video, which I didn't even know was a thing, but I was looking for a study Bible. And apparently there are people on YouTube that review study Bibles specifically. So I found the CSB translation through that video, and I actually really like it. I think it's very understandable, but very accurate in translation as well. So that's my current favorite.
Cool. Iron sights or red dot?
Iron. And I get a lot of comments about this because I know people like the new stuff, but I'm old-fashioned. I'm like, I'm a minimalist. So the less that I can have on my gun that can possibly fail me technologically, I just like my iron sights.
Makes sense. You don't have to change batteries in them. Yeah.
Right.
What is the worst advice you've ever received from some random person at the gun range who didn't know who you were?
Does gun shop count?
Oh, I'm sorry, judges. But yes, gun shop will be permitted.
Okay,
yes.
I'm going to give you one of each. Gun shop, I was buying my first shotgun, and a man came in. He was not an employee, but a man came in, a customer, and he told me that gun was too big for me, which it wasn't. And then at the range, this was actually recently, a gentleman came up to my husband and I and told me that I wasn't shooting when he came up to us. I was like prepping stuff, but he came up to me and he started talking and he was like, oh, well, if you want to get better, you should really get like a really good instructor, which was insulting to myself as an instructor and my husband who was there and as an instructor. Because I'm like, how do you know this guy's not my instructor? But it's just these assumptions, and I don't judge because I think previous generations especially grew up in a time where women weren't really into guns, or it's still not that common. So I get it. It's just I try to give them grace.
Yeah. There's a saying about assuming.
Yeah.
But yeah. So you, Kirk Cameron, Christian action movie. Why hasn't that happened yet?
Kirk Cameron.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but Kirk, if you're available, I'd be happy to do it.
Right. I'm thinking guest appearance by Lee Strobel, and we call it, it's like a Christian murder mystery, and it's the case for Christ.
Oh my goodness. I love
Right?
it. Yeah.
I'm willing to talk about the financials off camera, but I just want to get the seed planted. And
I like it.
We'll start there. So awesome. Well, that's really everything that I had. But thank you so much.
Thanks.
Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss while we're here?
I just want to encourage everyone because I think that where my two topics of firearms and faith intersect is encouraging people to take a step, because especially with women, getting into firearms can seem really intimidating and scary. And I think that even just reading the Bible can seem very intimidating. So I like to encourage people to just take that leap, especially when it comes to faith, because realizing the truth of the gospel is the most important thing you can ever do in your entire life. So if you're nervous about learning about guns, get a good instructor. And if you're unsure where to start with your faith, find a good Bible-believing church near you.
For She Equips Herself, is there a particular video that you feel is a really good introduction? I mean, besides if there's an introduction video on the YouTube channel itself, one that you feel like if somebody watches this and if they like that, then they're going to dig what you're about, and that's a good one for them to begin with?
I have a video on my channel called Why Women Should Carry Guns, and I think that gives a good overall view on my whole belief system when it comes to firearms and self-defense. So that's probably a good one.
Cool. And then where can people find out more about you if they want to go through one of your courses for She Equips Herself, or where can they find out more about Holy Hype?
So I've got my YouTube channels, She Equips Herself, and then Holy Hype. And for She Equips Herself, I've got a website where you can access my online courses. I like to do online courses because I can reach more people than I could just teaching in person. And we have like an online community that you can join as a student. So those are all on my website, sheequipsherself.com. You can find my courses on there. And then Holy Hype right now, you can listen to it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and then watch the videos on YouTube.
Cool. And I'll make sure and leave some links down in the description for this video so that people can click on over as well. But
Thanks.
Thank you so much once again for taking the time to do this interview. I really appreciate it. I hope that God continues to bless your endeavors with training people with firearms and training people with the Word of God.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Cool. Well, have a lovely day. Take care.